Hi everyone, it's Simon Peters, Walking the Way Project Manager here. Walking the Way, Living the Life of Jesus Today is a United Reformed Church's focus on whole of life discipleship, and it's all about supporting everyone in recognising God's presence in their lives and working out how we can be better disciples of Jesus in the context of our everyday lives. I sat down on Zoom with Adella Prichard, church related community worker for the Swansea region, to ask her a bit about her work as a CRCW, but also to ask about her experience with CWM looking at disability. I started by asking Adella to tell us what it means to her to be a CRCW.
Being a CRCW is just a way of life, really. When I first felt God was calling me to this role, at the time I was in retailing, so far removed. But then as I started to explore the core and learn more about what CRCW work was all about, I felt all the life experience I'd had were leading me to the point of candidating. And so, yeah, it just felt the right thing to be doing. And somebody during the candidating process sort of said, well, you've got to ensure you can't assume you will get through, and therefore you've got to be giving yourself some sort of plan B or how to consider how you'll feel about that. And rather blasé at the time, I said, I won't not get through. So I was fairly positive in my candidating. There was a time I had a bit of a desert moment when nothing seemed to be happening, and I thought, oh, am I not supposed to be doing this? But it was no, this is the right route to take. So once I was accepted, it was just an absolutely amazing thing. And so yes, being able to obviously, I did my course and learned a lot more then, and my placement experiences, and it just is my way of being.
Mm.
I think you have to recognise. Well, I think so anyway. As a church-related community worker, you try and think outside the box. You try and think different ways of doing things. And so now we are in the pandemic. That's really helpful because you just are used to doing, thinking things differently. Obviously, there are still the challenges. So I think I also like the freedom in that if I've worked with community workers from, say, the local authority or a housing association or this sort of thing, they've got their limitations in terms of their organisation's brief or responsibility or whatever. Whereas for me, I'm answerable. Okay, I'm answerable to a church meeting at the local church, but to God. And to be able to walk into a meeting and think, well, where is God in this? Is really liberating, and gives you the confidence to ask the awkward question, which I think sometimes some of the colleagues around the table might have been thinking it but won't ask it. So, yeah, it was said to me at my induction that I do seem to have this ability to ask the awkward question, which I was really pleased about because I think that's really important. Again, in my training, we learned about being very aware of who was losing out in a situation, and that's always something that stayed with me. Okay, something was going on, but who's gaining and who's winning, who's losing, more importantly, who's just not at the table. Because I've lived in Birmingham all my life, I came here and just felt so at home. It's a regional post, which is obviously very different to the posts I've had in the other two churches and communities, because I'm not just working with one church. So that's given me a new challenge of how I work, and obviously I've got more than one church, so it's more than one church meeting, more than one elders, more than one community, and all this sort of thing. But I would like to think it's working okay. and working with Unity and Diversity, which is asylum seeker and refugee charity. And because of the pandemic, my work with that charity has gone huge. And then with one of the churches, it's on hold really because of the nature of that church and what I can and can't do with them. And I really was concerned to begin with. I was thinking, I can't do what I've been called here to do. But because of thinking outside the box, and so many people are now, being able to do stuff online or whatever, then in actual fact, some of the work is continuing in a new way. So that's really helpful and keeps me positive and is opening new doors, new possibilities for us all, not just for me, but the people I work with. So, okay, you wouldn't like to have the pandemic, but in some instances, we're perhaps uncovering ways of doing things that we wouldn't have thought of before. And I can't remember now how I came across it, but I came across a talk from the owner community talking about flying kites and being an opportunity now to try things out that you perhaps haven't done before. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. Again, it's possibly a liberating time because some things you can't do anymore. So you have got to think of a different way of doing it. And it's quite surprising where that can lead, really. So, the clothing bank we've set up is at one of the churches I work with. And I guess the primary reason for that is to be able to still get clothing and bedding and toys and footwear, etc., to the asylum seekers. We take it to them. They obviously can't come to us. But that's meant we've needed volunteers. It's meant that those volunteers are learning to work as a team and getting to know one another more so than they perhaps would have done before. And then the church is being able to get involved as well. And just amazing things were produced ready for Christmas gifts. Absolutely incredible. And we were able to take out Christmas gifts to about 150 people, which possibly wouldn't have happened the Christmas before, So, yeah, things are happening. So my fear that we wouldn't be doing things has totally gone because we are doing things, we are accomplishing things, just not in the way I possibly thought we would.
That's extraordinary, and it's great to hear that work can continue despite the pandemic that we face. And as you say, there's a lot of creativity going on, which is wonderful to see. As you were talking about CRCW being about noticing the people who aren't at the table or who are not being listened to, I'm minded of the bit in the ministry's booklet about vocation from the URC about CRCW being focused on being a bridge between the community and the church in pursuit of the common good. Do you feel that that's a sort of fair assessment of what CRCWs are about?
I've got to be honest, I haven't thought of it as a bridge. I suppose it could be. It's obviously definitely a relationship growing between church and the community. And I think it's extremely important that it's recognised that relationship is going two ways. The church wants to support its community, but equally, it's got to be prepared to listen to what the community is saying to it. A church might think, like I have, oh yes, we need to do this clothing bank. But the people the clothing bank is for is, do they want a clothing bank? Sort of scenario. And I think there's nothing worse than a church thinking, oh yes, we want to do X project. when really what the community wants is why project. And I was very grateful for the first church I worked with, that they were totally on board with this, that I say it's a two-way process, and the church has got to be big enough, in inverted commas, to be prepared to hear what it might not want to hear. And if it's not prepared to listen, it shouldn't be doing the community work in the first place. Because hopefully it's not only about the community being transformed, it's about the church being transformed as well. And if the church isn't prepared to change by doing community work, then again, it shouldn't be doing community work. Because how can it stay the same when it's learning from others? You know, you obviously do your group work in your training, and all groups have their own way of doing things. All groups have their own language almost, you know, abbreviations and what have you. But you've got to find the common language, as if it's a church and community group working together. And both sides should learn from that and change from it accordingly. So yeah, I mean, not a hard bridge, I guess, a soft bridge.
I like that. That, yes, sort of malleable, changeable over time.
Yeah.
All parties need to be willing to move and change with it. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. If change is really going to be embraced, where you started obviously isn't where you're going to finish, and you've got to be prepared to have the space for that move to happen, that change to happen. You see, you know, that can happen in any organisation. We're going to do something new. Yes, great. That newness will cause change. Has that organisation got the space for the change? Yeah, with the work we're now doing with this asylum seeker group, we've almost become the victims of our own success, because we're not a big charity, but we could do with loads of volunteers. And I could quite easily work with a charity 7 days a week because of how busy we've got. And so it's about, you know, with the change, you need to have enough time and resources and people and all this sort of thing to be able to ensure that change is sustainable and it's sustained, really.
I mean, on that note, you know, I imagine that there will be a number of churches out there and a number of groups thinking, oh, we couldn't get involved with any of that community stuff because we don't have enough resources. But actually, I think it is possible for any church to get involved with some kind of community work, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, again, for CRCW, if they hear a church saying, oh, we're not going to do any community work till you arrive, as such, that is really worrying, because we're not there to do the community work for the church. We're there to do the community work with the church. And okay, yes, we're the full-time person. It's our role. And we've been trained. But especially now in this day and age with the good old internet and what have you, there's so much information you can find online. A church can do a small thing, as you know, just sitting down around the table, like I say, okay, what do we think we want to do? We want to do X. Who do we know who lives locally? Or, you know, obviously some people in the congregation might be local anyway. Is this what local people want to do? Or let's go and have a chat with a few people. Obviously it's difficult at the moment, but what is needed in the area? Can we as a church respond to that? We can all pray. We can all read our local paper. We can all know what the local news is, and we can all pray about it. And God can do the rest. So community work doesn't have to necessarily be face-to-face at this present time. It could be praying for matters. People can campaign, write to MPs, be aware of what JPIT is. Joint, yeah, you know what I mean, the joint.
Yeah, Joint Public Issues Team.
Thank you. Yeah, he's doing. I mean, again, there's loads of information on their website that can be a starting point for churches to look at. So, yeah. I guess people think, oh no, you know, we're not doing it the right way. Well, what is the right way? And if you're praying about it, if you feel God's calling you to do something in particular, then go for it, you know.
Absolutely. And I love how CRCWs are all about empowering people to do that. They're not there to do everything for you, but they're there to help you see what the opportunities are for working with the community, to share the love of Jesus in a way that is relevant, and helpful to those on the margins, those who are ignored and don't have their needs met. So that's very encouraging. It's great to hear about all the work with refugees and the clothing bank and food bank and different things in Swansea. Are there other pieces of work going on in Swansea that we should know about?
The role description the Post had was working with 4 different churches and the Asylum Seeker group. So the one church did have a very thriving community centre to it. So there was different groups using the building, and I'm the second CRCW in the Post, so I'm doing the second set of 5 years. And the previous CRCW, she built up a good relationship between the church and a local daycare centre, and they've got a community garden and they've got a community transport service, and they've now also got I don't know if you heard of the men's shed projects.
Oh yes.
Yeah, they've got a men's shed, but they're calling it an action shack.
Oh, good.
So I've sort of inherited, obviously, a lot of that work as well. Obviously, with COVID coming along, the groups aren't meeting at the church. But as and when, still trying to very much develop the working relationship between the church and the daycare centre, because what the relationship has produced is a community project of its own, because it being a local authority run daycare centre, that means they can't apply for certain funding, whereas having a relationship with the church, i.e. an organisation, the voluntary sector, they can apply for different sort of funding. So as I very much sort of inherited that, and because of the good work the daycare centre's doing, there's no formal organisational structure for that relationship, and so it needs it now again for sustainability. So working with them on that, and then a part of a team for that community looking at COVID support, and just recently joined another group in the area to look at events for the community, which obviously at the moment are all virtually online events or socially distanced events when the lockdown decreases. So yeah, got quite an involved role with that church. And then the church where the clothing bank is, we started doing outdoor church, which again I know is hardly a new thing, but it's a new thing, you know, with that church, and it's been great to do that. And that's allowed that church, those church members to see one another face to face. Okay, again, outdoors and distance, but it's part of that church's commitment to environmental issues, and you know, getting involved with that. The other church, one of the other churches, I hadn't got much involvement with that. It was more just taking a couple of services a year on community issues or social justice issues. But what we agreed was, I was making sure I worshipped with each church every month, that when I was there, we perhaps have a soup and roll top lunch afterwards, so that we could be looking at community issues. Of course, that's just not happening. Whether we could do it online, I am starting to wonder. So I think it's a case of watch this space with that one. And then the other church, just from their makeup of their congregation, just everything's on hold there really. But what they were wanting me to look at was seeing if there's any sort of support the church could give to their local retail sector, and to possibly see if there was any volunteer opportunities for people. Well, volunteering obviously has gone big, hasn't it? And so I don't really think that will be an aim anymore with that church, because it's being done without me having any involvement in that area at all. But yeah, then the work with the asylum seeker group, I'm always realising, is, if you think of it like a bit of an octopus with all its tentacles, all reaching out, it potentially can reach out into all those other churches as well, because obviously there's asylum seekers in the church did have the Thriving Community Centre. So as and when, we might be able to have a small asylum seeker group meeting at that church, it just, for people locally in that area. And I'm a big one on what I call cross-fertilisation, that, this group over here and that group over there could work together because they're doing similar sort of things. Or I know of these two organisations, but their members don't necessarily know about one another, so I introduce them. And very much, especially when you've got a church centre with different groups, I think it's really important that the different group members know about one another and know what's going on in that church, because it can benefit everybody then.
I want to cast your mind back now, if I can. I know it's a while ago and before the current COVID reality that we're in, but I know that you travelled to New Zealand to be part of the CWM Face programme. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what that programme was all about and how you felt about it.
Terrified to begin with. I've never travelled that far before, yet alone on my own. But it was once I became aware of the programme and the suggestion had been made that I might apply for it. It was a classic case, and I'm sure, so many people have experienced this. You think, no, not for me. And then there's a little voice saying, oh, yes, yes, there is. Yes, it is. This is for you. I was invited to apply because I'm partially deaf, hearing impairment. And the theme for the face-to-face programme in 2019 was for people in ministry with disability. So for me, straight off, doing a flight to New Zealand with 2 different airports, with hearing announcements and all this sort of thing, and hearing people talk to me through glass screens at passport control and all stuff like that. That in itself was a challenge. So we went there to sort of look at disability, look at how we put our own coping strategies in place, to learn what was happening in Auckland, in the disability community in Auckland. So we had what we call classroom experience and going out to visit places. We then worshipped with a local church every Sunday. We were there for 6 weeks. And obviously we had the opportunity to go to the library at the college as well. And had 2 great trips to see more of New Zealand. And I hadn't particularly done any previous study on disability in the Bible, for example. A couple of passages in the Bible I know, if you read them through disability eyes, for want of a better phrase, that you can see how horrific they are. But a lot more sort of was brought to my attention. The whole issue of ableism was really brought to my attention, and to realise how, as a society, everything's supposed to be perfect, and who is perfect in this day and age? And that can be seen in the Bible. It can be, and then just to look at churches and how the steps up to a lectern or a pulpit, and so somebody in a wheelchair, how are they going to manage with that? And to understand the whole issue of the different models of disability and how really in 2021 we should be looking at a model of disability called the friendship model, where other people could sort of talk about being hospitable as well, that somebody has got to be genuinely missed if they're not there. And say in a church service or part of church life. And that's because you've got to know them as a person, not as somebody who's in a wheelchair, but Jane, sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? And so, and to, it's, the a real jaw-dropping moment was when one of the tutors produced a crucifix, would it be? It was a cross with Jesus on, with his leg missing from the knee. Wow. So again, I'm rubbish at quoting authors and books and things, but we looked at a few books, The Disabled God, because once Jesus' side was pierced and nails put through his hands and feet, was he still perfect? Question mark. So yeah, it was an incredible experience in all sorts of ways. And part of the application progress, you had to put a exit plan together, what you would do when you came back. And I've done very little of because of COVID and stuff. But I am involved with the More Able Church project in the synod here. And that's really good because I'm able to feed into that with my experience and my learning. And we're doing an event called Equipping the Elders, and that's going to be addressing some of the disability issues, which we would like to think we might be able to sort of roll out more across the denomination.
Absolutely. Would you mind telling us a bit more about the Enable Church thing, because it's connected with CWM as well, isn't it?
So we're inviting churches to apply for funding, so that, to be able to do work on this being More Able Church. And I found out that the National Synod of Wales from the URC had applied, which at the time was really good to learn, because I was also going through the process of applying for the post here. So I thought, oh great, if I go to New Zealand and B, I go to Swansea, this could all work nicely together. So yes, it's bottom line. It's about bringing issue of disability onto the centre stage, and how do we respond to that in as an authentic way as possible. Or, do you believe the miracle stories? Was the blind man suddenly able to see? This sort of thing. And what was sort of explained to us from one author of a book, the person might not necessarily have been physically healed, but what Jesus was able to do was heal that person in such a way as they've realised they had got something to give to society. So they were no longer on the edge, and that they could fully participate. And that really struck a chord with me, because I think as CRCWs, that's something we try and do all the time. Everybody's got gifts and skills. It's helping people to realise they've got them and where to use them. And again, picking up from some other theory, of Paulo Freire, his name I can't remember. We might be the expert, but the person standing next to us who's had no formal training is an expert in their own lives, and they can teach us. And again, it's about seeing the other person's worldview and realising we've all got different worldviews and finding the common ground on those worldviews. I think Jesus did that as well. It's in the news and everything. There's people really struggling with different disabilities because of COVID. And it's really bringing it home to you with COVID how the ableist society is first and foremost. And then we start thinking about everybody else.
Just want to ask you that the strap line of Walking the Way is living the life of Jesus today. And I ask everyone I speak to in these recordings, what does that mean to you, to live the life of Jesus today?
I take great sort of solace from the fact that for Jesus, when the crowds were getting too much, he would go and find his quiet time. And then sometimes when he was being asked a question, he wouldn't respond straight off. He would pause and then give an answer. So obviously the guy prayed. So praying is very important to me. I wouldn't say I do it that well. I like to do different types of prayer. I think having quiet time and retreats and this sort of thing are very important, especially when you're a CRCW in a city area and what have you. You need to get away sometimes to just have the quiet time and the less busyness, if you're with me. So I always spend my CME money on retreats and pausing. Sometimes, you are getting into a type of society we live in. Everybody wants everything done now. Sometimes it's important not to do everything now. Jesus was countercultural, and I think sometimes it's more important not to respond than it is to respond, because you've got to have that time of reflection and weighing up everything that's in the scenario before you give a response. So yeah, I'm sure as soon as we switch off from this, I think, I should have said so-and-so, I should have said so. But those are what come to mind. Prayer, stillness, stroke quietness, and pausing before you say an answer.
Many thanks indeed to Adella for her powerful reminder that absolutely everybody is working, whether they realise it or not, to build God's vision of justice, joy and life for everyone. If you have a story about supporting others and living out their life as a disciple of Jesus, or an experience of God working in your own life, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email to wtw@urc.org.uk or find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Until next time, stay safe. See you soon.